clouds.
Awesome. Can you all hear me? Is this on? Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so thank you all for coming out today. Super happy to have y'all here. Really excited that AFWERX kind of gets to show off what we're doing and who we're working with, and for y'all on the industry side who are ultimately going to deliver a lot of the solutions that are going to get implemented by us to kind of interface with us and have that interaction. So overall, like Colonel Warren said, I am the Colliders lead within the Spark division. And kind of like the way I boil that down is really, it's simply matching solution providers to problem owners, right? So there's probably a better way to say that, or a longer way to say that, but if we keep that in the frame of reference of like this conversation, these folks up here are the problem owners that we are working with, right? So having them being given this opportunity to kind of talk about those problems to you all is something that's super important to us. So shortly I'll get into like letting the panel introduce themselves, but also by way of background, so I've been with AFWERX now for about 3.5 years. I'm kind of bouncing around the organization before getting into my current role. Was also prior enlisted, so I retired from the Air National Guard, did about 8 years active duty as well as a weather forecaster. So I've kind of seen the operator side, and now I'm on the acquisition side, which is a completely different world. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Chris to start the intro.
Thanks, James. Chris Ruwaldt, former F-16 crew chief, prior enlisted 4 years. Started my civilian career in 2016, right by the Air Force Base in Ohio. I do strategic logistics for the Air Force. I've worked in multiple program offices from the RQ-4B Lowell Hawk to F-16 for military sales. Now I'm on staff doing strategic logistics for the Director of Flight Cycle Management Center.
I'm Lowell, 8 years active duty as a civil engineer, spent a lot of time as a consultant, and then now I've been back in civil service for about 4 years. Been with AFWERX for a year now, which feels like an eternity. I think a year in AFWERX lab is really like seven actual years. I'm a civil engineer undergrad, and then I've got a master's degree in cybersecurity. So I kind of have a unique perspective on the resilient basing and kind of infrastructure hardening. So I kind of look at it both from the civil engineering nuts and bolts perspective, and also the digital ones and zeros on behind the walls perspective.
Thanks. Colonel J.B. Byrnes. I'm the Deputy Director for our A9 Directorate at Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center down in San Antonio. And then I also act as our division chief right now because we have a vacancy for our studies, analyses, lessons learned, and integration directorate. And so we're big into data and looking at how do we get the data we need, where do we put the data, and how do we make the most sense out of that data. And part of that is very much tied in with OI7 from the perspective of we got to make sure that data is secure and that we can get to where we need to go. And then on the OI5 side, obviously making sure that our bases are resilient and responsive. And a big part of that is making sure that we know what's going on at those bases through the data.
Good morning, my name is John Henson. I am an active duty Air Force officer working up at the Pentagon right now. I've been up there since 2022, working operational imperative number 5, which is the resilient forward basing piece. So I've been doing this about 2 years. Really looking, we're very focused on PACAF right now and the struggles that we'll have out there, and love to talk to you guys about that. Like I said, been about 20 years. Most of my time has been at the base level leading our airmen doing logistics work. So supply and transportation and fuels and getting us out of town or deploying airmen downrange has been most of my background. Spent about 3 years in AFRICOM working on the J5 staff, so doing work with embassies down in West Africa, and that's kind of my background, but we're ready to get some questions, I think. We're going to relay this back down to you. Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah,
okay, there we go.
We had a mic failure, so we're going to do totally we're going to go back and forth with this guy. So OI5, OI7, kind of the high level, that's what we wanted to get after. So what I wanted to start off with then is kind of at a high level, if you could explain to the audience on the OI7 team, kind of like what is OI7 and what is OI5, so that there's a pretty good frame of reference for folks in the audience.
Sure. So OI7, working here for the last 2 years for the SECAF. We're looking at hardening the cyber resiliency, the critical infrastructure within the states, specifically certain bases, to make sure that we can deploy and mobilize the force to get them out of town.
operational imperative number 5, resilient forward basing. All right, so right now our adversaries can target and range our bases. Right? And what that means is they can shoot us where we are. Right? So that's bad. We don't like that. We've not really been in that situation in a really long time. And so the Air Force has come up with this thing they call agile combat employment, right? So think about when you get to a really, really bad hotel and you turn the lights on and all the cockroaches scatter and go everywhere, right? It's kind of like that, but don't think of it exactly like that. It's the ability of the aircraft to disperse from where they are to other smaller places, right? Is that everybody? No, Daniel, kind of got what I'm saying, right? So that works, but that's not the only thing we need to do to make sure that our aircraft and our airfields are survivable. There's lots of other things we have to do. There's not a silver bullet. We just do this one thing and it makes it all better. And so that's what we're working on in OI5 is what's that optimized mix, right? Like what are all those things we need to do to take attrition down? How do we make sure that we are more resilient, that our bases are able to survive when we're getting shot at? Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, cool.
Cool. So, awesome explanation. So hopefully that level set a little bit. So going into kind of like the investment side of it. So Colonel Warren mentioned, right, the OIs were really to help prioritize some of the investment that we were looking at. So how have you on the OI side of the house actually been thinking about that in terms of prioritizing investment? Like how has it been guiding some of that decision making?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So looking at what the SecCap has come out and asked us to do with the parameters that we have, we've been really refining the specific requirements for OI7 to get after a certain problem set for that deploying the force, the log IT systems, to make sure that as we feed him our recommendations from different tabletop exercises and engagement with industry, find those innovative, creative thoughts to find solution sets, and make sure it's aligned and prioritized for what he's asking us to tackle.
So from an OI5 perspective, we've got quite a bit of analysis done by the headquarters analysis folks. They'll go down and they'll do war games. They'll put stuff into the computers and run those analysis that says, okay, if we do this, what's the outcome? If we do this, what's the outcome? If we do how can we see we call it a knee in the curve, right? How can we see if we change the ingredients a little bit, if we put more base defense there, or if we put a longer runway, or if we put more parking spots, or if we put fill in the blank, right? What investments do we need to make to answer the investment question? Where do we need to spend our dollar? That's the question the Secretary asks us regularly is if I give you $1 more, where are you going to spend it? And how is that $1 more going to make a difference? And so we rely heavily on analysis to make that decision.
Cool. So sweet. So now we've covered like at a high level OI5, OI7, right? Like those are at the Secretary of the Air Force level. Here's the things that we care about. So now it really Lowell and JB. Now I'd really want to dig into kind of like on the implementation side, right? Like y'all are working with the end users who are going to be ultimately getting after some of these issues. So how are you within AFWERX and how are you within AFIMSC kind of looking at these challenges and these prioritizations, and how are you working through these technology challenges?
Yeah, from the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center level, we're the sole intermediate headquarters for the Air Force. So between the headquarters Air Force and the installation level, we cover all of the bases around the world and we provide that support. And so what we're doing in terms of OI5 and OI7 is we've got teams that are looking out over the horizon and trying to figure out what are those new technologies that we need, as well as what's the new equipment, and how are we going to deploy the right airmen and guardians into those spaces to be able to fight those battles and be ready to implement the operational combat employment mindset. And so we're targeting some newer technologies, but we're also figuring out how we can be ready to fight, not just in 5 years or 7 years that it's going to take to get some of those investments to the fight, but what can we do today to get after that? And that's where some of what we've been working with AFWERX ties in really well, and particularly a program that Lowell has been working for us as far as building up the infrastructure that we need at the base level to be able to leverage a lot more of the data that comes out of the sensors from the infrastructure side and pull that back in to the systems that we need to be able to analyze and look at it in real time.
Yeah, so I would say that it's a bit of a theme for me to kind of have a foot in multiple worlds. So my current job at AFWERX, and I have some of my bosses here, so I want to make sure I do this justice, but my current job is to help technologies kind of writ large transition through the barriers of transition, and a specific emphasis on RMF, at least initially. My old job, when I worked at AFTEC, which is a primary subordinate unit to IMSC, I helped lead some programs as part of the Pendle rebuild installation of the future. So folks have probably heard that terminology. In that rebuild, one of the things that we envisioned was development of a digital twin of the full installation. And so, kind of like we were talking about, if you want to understand what's happening at a base, like the facilities, runways where you can park aircraft, getting access to fuel, the munition storage is here. What if there's a hurricane? What if there's a flood? What if there's a wind event? Things of that nature. If you want to be able to understand that from a centralized location for all of your bases in your portfolio, it would be really, really helpful to understand exactly what that infrastructure looks like. More detail, the better, right? So that helps you get better predictions and better estimates and develop better numbers so that you can inform the cost model that you give to whoever's going to potentially be giving you funding. So one of the things that we did was we developed a full-blown digital twin of Pendle Air Force Base, which is pretty neat. It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto or like a first-person shooter video game, of the base. It's also helpful in a ton of other use cases. So cops can come in there and train their forces. You can do exercises within the simulator. You could also even run like a flight simulator out of that engine because we developed it in a gaming engine. So there's a lot of really cool things and use cases that can be developed out of that digital twin. It's virtually limitless, the number of things you can do. But then on top of that, not only do you want to understand kind of the layout of the infrastructure and how those different systems could, in theory, interact with one another, you also want to understand what's actually happening across the base. And so you would probably think to yourself that, we know what our sensors are telling us, right? Like we know what all the building automation systems, the intrusion detection systems, all the systems that we have scattered across the base that are sensing, that we have a good sight picture on that holistically at the headquarters or MAGCOM or whatever echelon level you want to bring that up to. And sadly, we do not. And so the other program that we worked on was called IROC, and it was essentially the network infrastructure, the backbone that connects all those sensors out in the field up to the cloud, so that way you can make real-time decisions about what's happening across the base. And so I think you actually gave a really simple example of it when we were in the other room, or analogy. You've got your fingers that are out doing the sensing, and you've got your brain, and then IROC is really all the backbone of the infrastructure that takes those sensations from your fingers up to your brain so that you can make decisions. And so those are a couple of the things that we've been working on that JB mentioned.
So you used an acronym in there that I wanted to ask you to follow up on, right? So RMF, 3-letter acronym, it's kind of a 4-letter word if you're a company trying to go through that process, right? So if you wouldn't mind, Lowell, if you could pull that thread a little bit on the RMF side for the folks in the audience. So just by show of hands, does anybody know what an RMF is? Okay, so there are a few people that know, but for those that don't, would you mind explaining that a little bit and some of the challenges that as a company they should know about?
So man, this is an interesting audience here, so I'll do my best. If I mess it up, please feel free to step in. So RMF, Risk Management Framework, so you have all the data collection capability at the base. You've got a digital twin that we've developed, Pendle. You've got a lot of really interesting information that is helpful to decision makers and leaders to make decisions and prioritize investment across an installation. But you're also capturing information that could be very valuable and potentially deadly if it got into the wrong hands, or it was misused in a way that it gave us kind of a false sense of security, or made it so we didn't understand what was happening in a purposeful way to get after some other ends. So risk management framework is really the cybersecurity piece of making sure that the data, that the network, and the data that you're accessing are safe, and you're doing it in a way that the bad guys can't get access to it. So So risk management framework is derived from a DoD instruction, and then we have implemented, the Air Force has implemented DAFI 17101. If you ever get bored and you want to fall asleep on a plane, then I highly recommend you pull that DAFI down and start reading it. But it does do a good job of outlining the framework. Now, the process itself is subjective. There are some ways in which you have to execute the process, but it is highly subjective. And each authorizing official has their own interpretation. Each security control assessor team that actually grades your homework when you make submissions to that process. They all have slightly different interpretations of exactly how this should work. And so it becomes very difficult as you're trying to execute that as a mission owner to get your system through the process. And by the way, it's already a very technical, constantly evolving, complicated space that you're working in cyberspace. The threat is always evolving. Your risks and your vulnerabilities are always evolving. And so it's a near constant battlefield that you have to engage in.
Awesome, great. So one of the things I wanted to hit on as well, so all of us up here, I think, we've all been around the Air Force for some time now, right? None of us are new at this game. And we've all seen it at the lower levels where, technology is not new. We've always been bringing technology into the Air Force. Adoption has always kind of been a challenge, right? So especially since you kind of have like two levels of the organization here, right? Like from a policy perspective at the OI level, like how are you all thinking about fostering adoption of new technologies, but also at the implementation level, whether it be working with end users at installations or within like Air Force IMSC with the different centers that you're speaking.
And that's a great question. So for the OI7 team, we're absolutely looking at building out that robust lines of communication to make sure that we're incorporating those policy changes, what we can do to make things less hindrance for ourselves moving forward, trying to tackle this big problem set that we have this task this way.
People in policy, right? It's all down to people in policy. I came here last year to South by Southwest, and I was absolutely blown away with industry's ability to, like, the solution's out there, right? Like, we don't have any problems in America coming up with great answers to complex problems. We can do that all day long. The Department of Defense really has to work on its absorption capacity. You're exactly right, and I think you hit it on the head. It's policy and it's people. We have to understand the need to continue to move forward, right? To bring that technology in. I'm very encouraged by the senior leaders I see now and their desire and their willingness to lean forward. They're like, hey, we got to get after this. We got to get after this. And I think we need to continue to grow that in the Air Force, that ability that desire to absorb that new stuff. But it's policy, man. We got to figure out how to get around that policy piece.
From the Installation and Mission Support Center, a couple of things that we're doing specifically to get after OI5 is we did an expedient-facing challenge through AFWERX this year, where we did an open topic call with the Air Force Civil Engineer Center, where we said we need help figuring out new ways to bring on technology that we're going to need to fight the next fight. And so we've got that list. We've been working with AFWERX to get that onto a contract vehicle so that if we've got the money, whether it's through OI5 or other initiatives that we're working in the Air Force corporate structure, that we can get after those. We're taking those into the other division within A9 where I sit, our Innovation and Improvement Division. We do an innovation rodeo on behalf of General Allen, our commander, and that's where we execute and we figure out what are those next technologies that we can really go after. And in the past, we've been looking at problem sets from the installation user side. And we've been asking folks, hey, what are those pieces and parts that you've got a good idea for that we think we can work with you and get it to the point that it might be ready for adoption across the field. This year, we're going to pivot, and we're using that expedient-facing challenge as technologies that are ready to go and ready to implement. And we'll be looking at ways that we can then take those and look at scaling them across the force. Potentially through OI5, but if not through OI5, then just through our normal equipment reset process, which is a little bit longer time, but figuring out what are those new things that we need to be able to get after it. And so that's some of the stuff that we're working. Well, some thoughts from the AFWERX side.
I think transformation is hard, right? When you're looking at existing things that are out there that work and maybe serve the purpose at some point. Over time, maybe those don't continue to serve the same purpose and you need something new. And so when you try to put something new in, then obviously you've got the people that are in groups that are objecting, plans and policies, there are people and policies that are objecting to that. I think above and beyond that, just anytime you've got something that's big and interesting and potentially transformative, usually it's expensive, right? It's not free. And there are a lot of barriers to transition. RMF is one of the big ones. Fiscal law is one of the big ones. We ran into that issue where we thought, okay, we've got this great thing, let's deploy it, and then our lawyers told us we needed a different color of money. So we didn't. That's not even an obstacle that we thought was going to be on the playing field. Yet it's something that definitely stops us. And so there's all kinds of things that really get in the way of transition, especially when I think it's stuff that's really transformative in nature, because it requires people to literally stop what they're doing and do something different.
Nice setup for my next couple of questions. So those are some of the challenges, right? Like we on the government have in adopting technologies, but we're also like a pretty significant customer. And if you're a company trying to work with the DoD, then your primary goal is a defense use. We are probably the only customer, right? So what are some words of advice or things that you would tell companies to look out for, things that they should consider as they look at working with the government?
So from the OI7 perspective is getting in and getting that government rep and asking questions. The other part of that is that we know you have the key to this. The innovation that the industry brings to the table, as has been mentioned this morning, is absolutely necessary for us to close the gap.
That's a really big question. I guess just to answer quickly, I think our jobs as government employees are really difficult. I'm not complaining, but we have a hard time getting through all these barriers too. So the better educated that you are, like for example, if you've never read the OIs, I would recommend doing that. Understand what some of the laws are, understand what some of the rules are. If you don't understand RMF, break out 17101, you can get it through Google. So I would understand the policies and the laws well. I think that will help, especially as you're having those conversations with the government folks, because then you're speaking some of the same language that they already speak. So I would encourage folks to do that.
I would add just figuring out what are those pathways where the Air Force or the DoD is providing additional support. So AFWERX is a great example of that, and leveraging the SIBR and the SITR programs to be able to teach people and walk with people as they step through the process so that you're not just trying to figure it out on your own. The federal acquisition regulations are a very complicated mess to navigate, and so I've been doing it for 25 years. I discover new things with Lowell pretty frequently where we're like, oh, didn't know that was in there, didn't know we can't do that. So now let's go back to the drawing board and figure out how we're going to get the right money to be able to get after what we want to because of the fiscal law and then how it's tied to the FAR. So figuring out what those pathways are, what those engagements are, this is a great forum to be able to get the word out. At Air Force IMSC, we just had an Artificial Intelligence Industry Day a couple of weeks ago. The Air Force is doing that at multiple levels, multiple arenas with both directly as well as with non-federal entities like the Air Force Air and Space Force Association, Logistics Officers Association, just to make sure that we're having that industry collaboration. All right.
Awesome. So I've only got one more question. I'm also going to try and get some questions from y'all. So if y'all are queuing some up in your head, be thinking of them while we're answering this last one. But I like last night I was up because I've never moderated a panel before, so that was the thing that kept me up last night. So what is the thing that, the OIs are big challenges, right? They're significant and they're important. We have to get them right. So what is the thing that keeps you up at night when you're looking at things like this?
For me, it's two things. Did we get it right? Did we do it enough time?
Well, I think you did a fine job for your first time, I wouldn't have even known. So good work, thanks. Man, what keeps me up at night? I mean, lots of stuff. Definitely some insomnia. You know, I think the divisiveness. You know, I think what's happening today. And it doesn't seem to be just political, but there are things kind of even in the technical world where, you know, you have two groups or two people look at the same thing and they see something completely different. And, you know, my boss tells me that seems like we're doing, you know, some other unnamed countries work for them. I guess I can, right, China? We're doing China's work for them. So I would just say, you know, divisiveness, and maybe if we all try to be more empathetic, more compassionate toward each other and toward each other's perspectives and points of view, maybe that would help.
The thing that's always kept me up at night has been, are we going to give the Airmen and Guardians on the front line the tools that they need to fight that next fight when they need it? Last year I was deployed and I was the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing Chief of Staff. And what we were doing with agile combat employment, as well as integrating with allies and partners to be able to execute the war in the CENTCOM area of responsibility, was a difficult mission to execute. And we didn't always have what we needed, but what we did always have was Airmen and Guardians out there with us on a daily basis who were willing to figure it out, who were going to lean in and take whatever we gave them, and sometimes things we didn't give them, and figure out a way to make the mission happen. And so that helps me sleep better at night, but I'm always wondering what's that next thing. And that's why I really like the space that I work in at Air Force IMSC, working innovation and analytics, and really being able to think about how do we do this smarter, faster, and better.
Two things keep me up at night: the threat and the resources to meet it. The threat is a threat. Like the threat is real, everybody. The threat is real. I'm telling you, it's real. And we got to have resources to meet that threat. My son's 14. My son will turn 15 this summer. So in the next 5 years, if we don't get this right, he's going to have skin in the game. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? I'm guessing that everybody in the room's got somebody of that age in their life. And that keeps me up at night. The threat is real, and we have to have the resources to address it.
Awesome. Well, before we start the questions, I just wanted to thank y'all for y'all's answers and super insightful stuff. So with that, I think we have a gentleman in the back who's got a nice little styrofoam microphone. And I don't know if we're going to throw it, but it is soft, so he could show off his arm if he wanted to. So do we have any questions? Looks like we have one over here.
Thanks. I'm Omar Hakim, CEO of Waterloo Solutions. What keeps me up at night is electromagnetic pulse and high-altitude electromagnetic pulse weapons. So our company has developed a new type of Faraday cage that we think can help Space Force, Air Force, and other DoD departments address EMP. We just don't know where do we go. So when I hear about this, the OI 1 through 7 initiatives, which one of those initiatives is thinking about EMP, and which door do we knock on?
So,
Can you come talk to me after? I'll be glad to talk to you. So I will tell you, yes, we are thinking about it, and I would venture to guess that all of the OIs are very interested in making sure that we are protected against that particular threat.
got one here up at the front.
Thank you guys. This was really informative space here. So just a quick question, probably a loaded question for you guys. AIRMF, how are you thinking about that with the portfolio companies? I think all this for you that are coming through AFWERX, and you know, how do you make it easier for them with sort of this being the year of AI? We've got this rapid adoption of 7,000 AI startups. How does AFWERX help with that AIRMF?
So you got an easy one for us.
Yeah, easy.
I think within the Air Force, one of the things I'm trying to do is develop ecosystems or develop places where code capability can be tested in kind of a safe environment. It's not necessarily connecting to an actual production network, and/or it's not using actual data. Make sure that we actually like the thing first, right? Make sure that the functional communities that care about that space want to adopt the thing in the first place. And then from there, really invest those enterprise resources to make sure that it's secure and make sure we're doing the right thing. Man, AI is such a big space. I'm constantly listening to podcasts and stories where they're talking about how it's going rogue and doing all these weird things, and it's mirroring our society, which isn't always the best thing for AI to do. And so, it's a good question, and I think a problem set that we're going to continue to struggle with for a long time. And I probably am not even the best person here to even talk about something like this, but good question.
The other way that we as the Department of the Air Force are getting after this is we have a digital acceleration task force that has an industry association consortium, which is tying into the academic community as well as industry to find out what are those best practices, what are those things that as we're thinking about this as DoD, what should we be putting in place in terms of governance, rule sets, capabilities that are already operational. Can we bring some of those in? Can we feed them our data to train? And do we want them trained on our data, or do we want them operating from our data? And where is DoD in that loop? And then longer term, the decision of is this a human on the loop, human in the loop, or no human in the loop? Because of the speed of the decision is that important, and you're confident enough in both the AI and the data that it's using to make that decision that you're ready to move forward. And so we're looking at that from a lot of different perspectives and trying to lay in the policy and procedure to build it out. But the bigger question is what is America doing about this, and how can we as a Department of the Air Force, or partnered with the Army as well within that IAC group, to really get after that at a much higher level and pull in all of the expertise across the country.
All right, I think we have one more here. All right, I'm calling it.
Okay, outstanding, thank you. So my name is Rex Eisen. My name is Rex Iser from RICOR, and we develop tactical cooling systems that hopefully displace the need for FPCUs, generators, and the like. So the questions I heard, a couple of mechanisms to contact y'all through the base challenging, maybe SIVR, but what are the other mechanisms that we can come forward and actually robustly connect? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I'll take the first swing at it. So I think like the easy button is yeah, there is no easy button, right? So the easy button is I think you can always go to the website, right? So you can reach out to us through the website, contact us, and we'll route the question to the right person. There's also, we're trying to get industry days more and more common and frequent. We've worked with IMSC on a couple of them now, because ultimately we want to get industry and the government folks connected, right? Like, be it virtual, be it in person, like we want y'all to talk, so that you can, one, understand what the customer cares about, but also like who the customer is. Like the government, like we are like physically removed from them. You can't walk on base and cold call, right? So that's one of the barriers we're trying to work through. There's also the open topic. If you're familiar with AFWERX, you've probably heard about the open topic, where you can, if you see a military application for your technology, you can submit it to the open topic. You don't need a requirement from us to do so. So I would say those are kind of right now on the AFWERX page, on the Air Force IMSC page, like you can find events that are coming up, but also you can reach out through the AFWERX page.
So we have an open topic page already.
Oh, also,
So that's why I'm still trying to think the next layer or the next.
So you're a small business? Yeah, so I mean, SIVR open topic. If there's a specific topic that lines up, I would also highly encourage you to kind of understand what the priorities are, right? Like, read the OIs and kind of understand like what we care about. And then AFWERX Challenge, so this is a shameless plug for the AFWERX Challenge program. They actually do a series of challenges that happen, periodically, and they have different kind of areas of emphasis. This most recent one, the expedient basic one, is the CSO, the commercial solutions opening for that is actually closed. So the award the awards haven't been made, but like the CSO, like the folks have been down selected, and it's you can no longer make a new submission to it. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But they continually happen, and so I would keep your ear to the ground and watch that website for challenges that you think you might be able to participate in. So I think those are two good AFWERX avenues. The SIPR portfolio is really quite large. There's quite a few dollars that are there, and so I would make your pitch in the form of the SIPR application. And again, the more informed you are kind of on what the priorities are, the better success I think you'll have.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm getting the Oscars music right now. Oh, one more. Okay, we can do one more question. One more question. I don't know if I have an update specifically on that, Lowell, do you?
I would phone a friend, like other folks that are.
Well, I'd actually make a plug. So tomorrow, so if you walk out these doors and to the right, we'll have some office hours open, and we'll have some folks from our ventures team who are probably better to answer that question. So yeah, I would definitely take advantage of that. And that's for anybody in the room. We'll have open office hours. Y'all can swing in there and talk about some of those opportunities. And that's a common question that team gets. So I'm sure somebody will.